The town of Willow Creek had always prided itself on its quiet streets and close-knit community. Nestled among them was the Hartley family, who lived in a pristine, colonial-style home on Oak Ridge Drive. The head of the family, David Hartley, was a successful pharmacist, known for his friendly demeanor and community involvement. At 51, he was the picture of a model citizen, generous, sociable, and devoted to his family. He was married to Linda, a schoolteacher who commanded respect and admiration for her commitment to her students and her calm, gentle nature. To the outside world, the Hartleys seemed to have it all: a beautiful home, successful careers, and a blended family that exuded love and togetherness. Linda had a son from her previous marriage, 24-year-old Sean Miller, who had grown up with David as a father figure. David was proud of Sean, often seen with him at community events, volunteering at the local shelter, or attending the annual Willow Creek Fair together. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family lay dark secrets that would soon tear their lives apart. David had been living a double life. For nearly 3 years, he had been entangled in a secret romantic affair with his stepson, Sean. Sean, struggling with his own identity and seeking validation, was lured into the relationship by David's manipulative and persuasive tactics. The illicit affair remained hidden from everyone, including Linda, who remained blissfully unaware of the darkness brewing within her family. David was meticulous in hiding his tracks. He maintained his reputation in the community while living out his desires in secret. To keep Sean close, he would often invite him to join in on late-night pharmacy checks at the store, which provided the perfect cover for their rendezvous. The affair's intensity grew, leading David to take greater risks. He would frequently book expensive hotel rooms or even use his clients' vacant properties for secret encounters. As time passed, Sean began to feel trapped, increasingly uncomfortable with the situation, yet unable to break free from his stepfather's emotional grip. In early June 2023, Linda planned a weekend getaway to visit her sister. With the house to themselves, David saw an opportunity to push the boundaries further, inviting Sean for a private dinner under the guise of needing help with home repairs. Sean reluctantly agreed, torn between his complicated feelings for David and his growing fear of the consequences if anyone found out. That Saturday evening, the two shared a tense, quiet meal in the Hartley kitchen. David, sensing Sean's hesitation and growing anxiety, tried to soothe him with comforting words and promises of a future together. But Sean was no longer the impressionable teenager he had once been. The weight of their secret relationship was becoming too much to bear. Overwhelmed by guilt and fear, Sean abruptly left the house, leaving David frustrated and alone. Little did either of them know this would be the beginning of the end. As the days passed after that tense dinner, Sean became increasingly withdrawn. He spent more time out of the house and less time speaking with his mother, Linda, or David. His mind was a whirlwind of fear, guilt, and confusion. He knew he needed to escape this toxic situation, but he was trapped, emotionally, financially, and mentally. To complicate matters, David's behavior became more erratic and possessive, pushing Sean to maintain their secret and reinforcing his dependence on him. Linda began to notice the tension between her husband and her son. She chalked it up to the usual strains of a blended family, but there were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, when she would catch a strange look between them or a quick, tense exchange that felt far too personal to ignore. As a mother and a wife, Linda's intuition was kicking in, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what was wrong. One evening, after Sean had stormed out following a heated argument with David, Linda confronted her husband. She demanded to know why things were so strained between him and her son. David, ever the smooth talker, dismissed it as just a phase, suggesting Sean was simply going through a rough patch. Linda tried to believe him, but a nagging suspicion kept growing in the back of her mind. The following week, things took an even darker turn. Sean received a string of angry texts from David, demanding that they meet to talk things through. Feeling cornered and desperate for a way out, Sean decided to come clean. He reached out to his friend Carly, who had known him since high school. Carly listened in stunned silence as Sean tearfully revealed the twisted relationship he had been hiding for years. She was horrified, but she also realized how dangerous the situation had become. Carly convinced Sean that he needed to distance himself from David and seek help. That night, she let him stay over at her place. She also suggested that he speak to a counselor or someone in authority who could guide him on what to do next. Sean agreed, relieved to finally share his secret and feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in years. However, David was not one to let go so easily. The next day, he showed up unannounced at Carly's apartment, demanding to see Sean. Carly stood her ground, refusing to let him in. A heated exchange erupted on the doorstep, with David threatening Carly and insisting that Sean belonged with him. Carly called the police, but by the time they arrived, David had already sped off, leaving behind a rattled Sean and a frightened Carly. It was clear to everyone involved that things were spiraling out of control. David's desperation was reaching new heights, and Sean knew that he was in real danger. 2 days after the confrontation at Carly's apartment, David's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He was now obsessively calling and texting Sean, swinging wildly between pleading for forgiveness and issuing thinly veiled threats. Sean, exhausted and scared, blocked his stepfather's number, yet he knew it was only a matter of time before David would escalate further. On June 17, 2023, Linda came home to find David sitting in the living room, visibly agitated. His normally composed demeanor was gone. He was jittery and unfocused. He asked Linda if she had heard from Sean, but his voice held a strange undertone, one that was almost menacing. Linda lied and said she hadn't. She had spoken with Sean earlier that day, and he had told her he needed some space to think things through. He didn't tell her about the affair, but his distress was palpable. That night, David's paranoia seemed to reach its peak. Unable to sleep, he downed half a bottle of whiskey and stumbled into the basement, where he often retreated when troubled. He began ranting about Sean's betrayal, his words slurring, as if he were speaking to someone who wasn't there. Hours passed as David's mutterings turned into incoherent ramblings. At around 2 a.m., he grabbed his car keys and stormed out, driving off into the night. Meanwhile, Sean was back at Carly's place, still shaken from the confrontation with David. He knew he needed to take action to protect himself. As he sat there in the dimly lit living room, Carly suggested filing a restraining order against David. It seemed like a logical next step, and for a moment, Sean considered it. But he also feared the consequences, what David might do if he felt cornered. That night, sleep eluded him. The hours stretched on, filled with anxiety and dread. Finally, around 3:30 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "David's missing. He's been drinking. I'm scared." Panic set in. Sean knew this could only mean one thing: David was coming for him. Sean's suspicions were confirmed when shortly after, Carly's doorbell rang. She peered through the peephole and saw David, disheveled and angry. "Sean, open the damn door," he yelled, his voice echoing through the hallway. Carly immediately called 911 while Sean barricaded himself in the bedroom, his heart pounding with fear. Within minutes, the police arrived. David was combative, refusing to leave, shouting about family matters. The officers, recognizing his state, detained him for the night, but without concrete evidence of a crime, they couldn't hold him. David was released the next morning, angrier and more desperate than ever. Back at the Hartley home, Linda could see the cracks in David's facade widening. She knew now that her husband was hiding something far darker than she had imagined. She decided to dig deeper. She began by searching through David's personal belongings, his desk drawers, his phone records, and his emails. What she found would change everything. Linda's hands trembled as she sifted through David's emails and phone records. Her heart pounded with every new revelation. There were dozens of messages between David and Sean, stretching back years, some explicit, others filled with emotional manipulation. It was all there, laid out in black and white. The realization struck her like a punch to the gut. Her husband had been having an affair with her son. Stunned, Linda sat in her living room, staring blankly at the evidence in her hands. She could hardly breathe. The betrayal was unimaginable, and her mind raced with a mix of rage, sorrow, and disbelief. How had she missed this? How could she have been so blind? After what felt like hours, Linda made a decision. She needed to confront David, but more importantly, she needed to protect Sean. She called Sean and told him everything she had found. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Sean, his voice breaking, whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to get out." Linda, now trembling with anger and determination, assured Sean she would handle it. She hung up and waited, pacing around the house like a trapped animal. Finally, David came home, still fuming from the previous night's events. When he saw Linda standing there, eyes filled with fury, he knew something had changed. "You've been lying to me, David," Linda said, her voice steady but cold. "I know everything." David's face drained of color. For a moment he tried to deny it, but Linda cut him off, showing him the messages she had printed out. There was no escaping the truth now. David's demeanor shifted from shock to anger. "You don't understand, Linda," he spat. "Sean loves me. He's the one who— Don't you dare blame this on him," Linda shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "You manipulated him and you destroyed our family." The confrontation escalated quickly. David, cornered and desperate, lashed out, shouting and blaming everyone but himself. Linda, fueled by anger and betrayal, threatened to expose everything, to the community, to the police, to everyone. In that moment, David's rage turned to panic. He couldn't let that happen, not when his entire life, his career, his reputation was at stake. David lunged toward Linda, grabbing her by the arms and shaking her violently. "You think you can just ruin me?" he snarled. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Linda broke free and ran toward the door, but David caught up with her, slamming her against the wall. She screamed, clawing at his face, desperately trying to get away. In the chaos, David shoved her hard, causing her to hit her head against the edge of a cabinet. She collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Breathing heavily, David stared down at his wife, his mind racing. Panic set in as he realized what he had done. He knew he needed to act fast, but his thoughts were disjointed, his world crumbling around him. Then, he made a fateful decision. David stood frozen in the living room, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Linda lay motionless on the floor, her head bleeding from the blow. Panic surged through him, but he couldn't afford to lose control now. He needed to clean up this mess, both literally and figuratively. His mind raced through options, and he knew he had to silence anyone who could expose him. That meant finding Sean. He wiped his hands on his pants, grabbed his keys, and hurried out, leaving Linda behind. He sped through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. He knew exactly where to go: Carly's apartment. He'd overheard enough from Linda's phone calls to know that's where Sean had been hiding. Tonight it would all end. Back at Carly's place, Sean was anxiously pacing. He had sensed something was terribly wrong after his mother's call. He couldn't shake the fear that David would do something drastic. Carly tried to keep him calm, but even she was on edge. The air felt thick with impending doom. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the apartment, followed by David's unmistakable voice, bellowing from the other side of the door. "Sean, open up, we need to talk." Carly's face turned pale. "Oh my, he's here," she whispered. She quickly grabbed her phone, ready to call the police again, but Sean stopped her. "No, we have to end this. I need to face him." Sean approached the door, his hands trembling, and unlocked it. David burst in, his eyes wild and his face twisted with rage. "What the hell have you done, Sean? You've ruined everything." Sean tried to stand his ground, his voice steady but his body shaking. "No, David, you ruined everything. You manipulated me and you destroyed our family." David advanced toward Sean, his fists clenched. "You think you can just walk away from me? After everything we've been through?" But before he could get any closer, Carly stepped between them. "You need to leave, David. The police are on their way," she said, holding up her phone for him to see. For a moment, David seemed to consider his options. Then, with a sudden burst of rage, he shoved Carly aside and lunged at Sean, knocking him to the ground. A struggle ensued, both men grappling desperately. Sean tried to defend himself, but David, fueled by a toxic mix of anger and fear, overpowered him. In the chaos, Carly saw a heavy glass vase on the nearby table. She grabbed it and, without hesitation, swung it at David's head. The vase shattered on impact, sending shards flying everywhere. His grip on Sean loosening as he stumbled backward, dazed. Sean seized the moment. With a burst of adrenaline, he pushed David off him and scrambled to his feet. David, disoriented and bleeding, reached out, but Sean shoved him hard, sending him crashing into the wall. The sound of sirens filled the air as David slumped to the floor, finally subdued. The police stormed in moments later, guns drawn. David was quickly restrained and arrested, his wild eyes darting around the room as if searching for a way out. Sean, bruised and shaken, collapsed into Carly's arms, sobbing with relief. As the officers led David away, Sean broke down. He had survived the ordeal, but the emotional scars would take a lifetime to heal. He would have to confront the trauma of his past and rebuild his life from the ground up. Linda survived her injuries, but remained deeply shaken by the truth she had uncovered. The Hartley family's perfect facade was forever shattered, leaving a wake of pain and betrayal that the community of Willow Creek would never forget. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark secrets behind seemingly perfect lives, make sure to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more gripping true crime stories that uncover the truth behind the headlines. Stay tuned for more crime documentaries.